Hey, everybody. Here's this Agile thing. I'm Matt Beam.
I'm Mike Markey.
And I'm Jeff Singleton.
Fantastic. So for this week, we've got this thing called the 6 Types of Working Genius.
Yes.
This is a suggestion from Mr. Markey from a book by Patrick, how do I say his last name?
Lencioni. The
Lencioni.
6 Types of Working Genius.
Fantastic.
Many of you may
This
have
is
heard of Patrick Lencioni. He has done many books like The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team and The Advantage and various other, just some, general how to get along in business without really trying kind of things.
That was a movie.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
So
I did get a copy of the book. I sort of looked through it. I summarized a little bit. Do you want me to just give the people the 6 types?
no,
to
I would
define
rather
them so
do
we
that.
Oh, fantastic.
So the 6 Types of Working Genius, it's based largely on the type of things you have to do to deliver work, any type of work, any sort of thing that we deliver in the sense of our, or in the course of our day. All right, so here's the thing: is we've got 3 types of main work: ideation, activation, and implementation, and we go through those. And each one of those types of work is divided into 2. What Patrick refers to as his geniuses. And the geniuses represent the stages that most work goes through, from the inception of the idea all the way to the final completion of the work. So the first stage is wonder. It's the when you're pondering, you're asking questions, you're wondering what could be different in the world. It's the people who are operating in this mode are the ones asking the questions of how can I make the world a better place? How can I what needs to be fixed, basically. And then the second phase is invention. That's when somebody takes the big question that was asked by the wondering, and then they try to brainstorm a solution. They come up with creative ideas. They try to challenge the status quo. They come up with a new way of solving that issue. The activation part, that's part of ideation. The activation part is when we start judging whether or not those ideas are any good, whether or not those solutions are worth doing, and that's the process of choosing the winners and the losers, the good and the bad, is known as discernment. And discernment is the thing where you're going with your gut feel, or you're going this based on things I've seen before, based on my experience. I think this is a better idea than that idea. These are the inventions we should move forward with.
Not a data-driven approach.
No, it is definitely not data-driven. It's more gut feel. Okay, so now you've got somebody thought of a problem, someone thought of a solution, somebody judged which ones we should do next. Then we move into the next phase, which is galvanizing, the last part of activation. And that's when you start rallying people to jump in and do this, right? This is the basically getting people to buy into the idea. So you're inspiring people with the notion. You're out there, you're building things up. You're trying to get people fired up and ready to do this. So now we've finished ideation, we've finished activation. Now we're ready to actually get into the implementation, and that's where enablement comes in. The first of the geniuses in there is called enablement, and these are the first people who will jump in to do things. These are the volunteers. These are the guys who take the rallying that was done by the galvanizing actions and says, okay, I'm in. I'm gonna push this thing forward. And finally, there's tenacity, and tenacity is the part where the rubber meets the road. This is where the actual work gets done. So we've gone through all these phases. These are all necessary steps from the ideation all the way to the implementation. And it turns out, can you guess what it turns out? It turns out that different people have an affinity for different aspects of this.
What?
And other people have a frustration with it. Like so the way that Lencioni defines this is everybody has 2 working geniuses. These are the things that are their natural energy creating behaviors. Of the 6, 2 of them you're affiliated with are your working geniuses. These are the ones, your natural gifts. These are the ones you feel energized, you feel fulfilled. You could do these all day, every day, forever, and never wear yourself out.
Yeah.
The frustrations are the opposite end of the scale. Now, these may not necessarily be things you're bad at, but you doing them for any length of time is bad for you. It drains you of energy. It sucks the life out of you. You may have to do it, but
Might be
you're
part of
not
your
going to
job.
be happy with it, right?
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you're stuck doing the things you're frustrated with all the time, maybe you're not in the right role, right? And then the things in between, the other two that aren't your frustration or aren't your genius, those are just your competencies. Those are you're good at them. You know how to do them. You can do them. You just don't enjoy it quite as much. You might not be able to keep going at it as long as you could with the actual geniuses.
Totally. Somebody's clearly read the book. Let me applaud you. You know what this is about.
I did. I read the book, and then and I took the assessment that comes with it.
As did others.
Yes, and so as you're reading the book and you're going through and you're saying, "Hey, I'm going to try and summarize this material for the listeners at home," you start reading into what the different geniuses mean, and you try and decide which ones you think you have an affinity for. And as I went through it, I know that there are things that I would think that I'm viewed as being good at. And there are things that I know I am not good at. There are things that I know are
Same.
the places where it drains me.
Yeah. Same.
And so I knew going into it, no matter what, my tenacity was going to be right in the toilet. That was going to be the low one. And you can see that. You will look around my house. I have a million started projects and a handful of finished projects. I've got there's a staircase over there that is missing wallboard because it just isn't. It's just not worth it to go put the wallboard up at this point. And so, tenacity is one of the things I struggle with. So if I'm on a team, counting on me to be the closer to bring something to the end is probably
doomed.
it's not a good idea. It's like I can do it. I will do it if I have to, and this fits into the
But you'll hate
this
it.
fits into the procrastination discussion as well, right?
You'll hate it.
It's almost a reason behind the procrastination discussion. Unless I got a panic monster driving me, I'm not going to finish something.
Call back.
All right. Yeah. Call back to earlier thing. Go back and read that. So, I knew I was going to have a problem with that one, but as I went through it, I'm going, okay, so which one are going to be the ones that it says are my strongest? And I kind of guessed it might. It was funny at first. I was going, oh, it's definitely going to be invention. Like invention is definitely going to be in there. I'm always like dreaming up a new way of solving problems. In fact, I can't stop myself. Even when we've got one, I'll keep thinking of different ways. So I was sure that invention was going to be up there. But then as the week went on, now that I'm aware of it, I start paying attention to the things I normally do. And I start going, well, I keep asking questions. I mean, maybe wonder is one of my big ones. Maybe I should,
You wondered
I
about
would have
that?
Wondered
thought,
about it,
I would have thought maybe it was more discernment, but if it was discernment, I would be coming to an answer on this. And I just keep, so it's funny. I took the thing and it said wonder and invention were my geniuses.
Wonder and
So
invention.
the ones in the ideation side of the thing, those are the ones that I could ideate all day, every day, according to this, right? Now I look at that and I go, yeah, I enjoy those things, but I also enjoy the discernment and I didn't think I enjoyed galvanizing until I read more into what galvanizing is, and galvanizing is really more the evangelization of an idea.
Rallying, motivating, and provoking people to take action around an idea or an initiative.
Yeah. See, and I'm like, so maybe I do galvanizing, but I can say this. I like doing the evangelizing. I will do the evangelizing, but it does wear me out as I do it. I will eventually get tired from doing that.
Yeah, it reminds me of the what I hear about the distinction between an introvert and an extrovert, right? It's not that if you're an introvert, you can't be outgoing and be around people, but you find it draining, right?
Yeah. And this is
I suppose.
in the book he describes the draining isn't, like just because something is a frustration for you and it drains you of energy doesn't mean it's
It's not a genius of
well,
yours.
no, it is, but he likens it to like a bucket of water. The thing that you are passionate about, your geniuses are going to be, the bucket is always full. The bucket may be even filling up more. The things that are your competencies, there's a hole in the bucket and the water's sort of draining out, but it will keep it'll be in there for a while, as opposed to your frustration, which is basically wet bucket.
I like the fire analogy. It's like maybe you're the third one is kind of like trying to make a fire with wet wood. Like you have to pour so much energy into it, you can't get the process self-sustaining. Whereas if you've got really good fuel, it just takes off.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, this is the topic today. We're talking about these working geniuses, and I had you guys take the assessment too. So I've already covered the things that it says I'm good at. It says I'm good at the wonder and the invention, and my frustrations are, surprise surprise, tenacity, and surprisingly actually enablement. And so from an enablement perspective, when I look at that one, I go, well, okay, so I got to not look at frustration is necessarily a negative thing. It's just you will get tired if you do too much of that, right? So
But it's necessary.
but it's all necessary. It all needs to get done, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, part of what I understand Patrick's point is to understand it's kind of like different communication styles, right? Like these are just sort of naturally where we come from, but if you don't know that somebody else has a different communication style than you can butt heads without really understanding why.
Yeah.
Right? You can have a team of people, and if they're all galvanizers and nobody's wondering or tenacious, it's the team is unbalanced in terms of all the skills that they need to. So kind of the point of it in terms of a team context, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to understand the natural tendencies of the people so you can get a good mix of all the skills you need to take the idea from initiation or ideation to
Yes.
shipping.
So if you've got a group of people, say a group of coaches who are working together and they're supposed to get a bunch of stuff done, it's good to know who you could count on at which stage of the process. And if you guys have a gap in one of the geniuses, it's generally a bad idea not to skip a genius. So how do you fill the gap? Does somebody who at least has a competency in that arena, do they step up and do some of the stuff there? Or if everybody sees a certain areas of frustration, then you just kind of all have to grit your teeth, rally together, and push each other through it. So I'm going to say, hey, so I was big on the W and the I and low on the E and the T. How about you guys? Did you?
So I took the assessment, and just to preface, I saw it as not unlike a lot of other assessments, whether it's a DISC assessment or a Myers-Briggs assessment or this assessment or that assessment. And so I didn't read the book yet.
What?
I will, but I did not get a chance to read the book. And maybe there was a benefit in that. And so, it didn't inform me to influence how I thought I should answer things.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
maybe there was a dose of honesty, more honesty, I guess. But in that, I appreciated what Mike was providing as kind of some context here, because my first impression of the results were, well, no, that's not what I said.
Interesting.
And so it led to a little bit of skepticism, just like I have of other assessments, that they're not always spot on. But I think to the point that the modifier that you made was, it's not that if it's not in your working genius, it's, if it's a frustration, it doesn't mean that you're not good at it. It just means that it drains you. And so given that slightly different context, I thought, okay, maybe I can go with this. So for me, it was I and E. So the invention and enablement.
Mm-hmm.
So
Those are your geniuses.
Those are his
were
geniuses.
the geniuses. So naturally gifted, and derive energy and joy from creating original and novel ideas and solutions. Yeah, I mean, of course, as we know, ideas are a dime a dozen.
Yeah, you need some
it's-
tenacity. You're right.
Exactly.
But you need someone with some discernment to decide which of those dimes you should be spending.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of them. Yep. And so, what are your frustrations? What are the ones that you're lowest in?
Frustrations, well, the frustrations were tenacity and discernment.
Interesting.
And so I thought that was really interesting too, because I could see the tenacity maybe as very, very draining.
That's surprising because you strike me as an extremely accomplished person, Mr. Singleton. You're a pilot, and you've I don't want to blow you in, but you've done a bunch of stuff. How could a person who's low in tenacity?
You'd think you would want someone who was a pilot to really see things through to the end.
I mean, talk about a person who needs to get it right to the end.
So,
Yeah.
I think we're going to have some fun with this. This is going to be interesting.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jeff.
No, and you're spot on here. So I thought, I'm not so sure about that tenacity thing, because I really am about the perseverance and can be very tenacious. Am I always tenacious about everything? No. And so I wonder if my answers may have influenced that. I don't know. But I did feel like that might not have been super accurate or representative. Now the discernment, and you have to remember, a lot of the coaching and consulting that I do with startups really does focus on a lot of these things. The whole notion of it's not enough to have a good idea, they're a dime a dozen. You actually have to prove this out, and the people that succeed are the ones that actually have that tenacity, have the good discernment. And so if I'm supposedly consulting and teaching people about this, I would tend to think that I would have that. But I don't know, I scored low on it. So it says you're not naturally gifted at discernment.
So
and don't derive energy.
Here's part of the thing. Discernment, to Matt's point, he mentioned this earlier, discernment has a huge component of intuition. Like, you go with your gut. Now, is it possible that your decision making is really more data driven? So it would come more from one of the other geniuses than it would come from that natural gut feel reaction that discernment is implying.
So now that's a very good point. It is more data driven, because when I am consulting with startups, a lot of times, innovators, entrepreneurs, they come up with an idea and they go with their gut, and that's fine, but some data is really going to help buttress.
See, you're uncomfortable.
Are you in the right direction?
Like, they go and they go, "Hey, my gut says we're doing this. We're gonna spend $1 million on Furbies, and that's it. That's the decision that we're doing."
And Jeff says, "Show me the potential money."
Right. Because that's what venture capitalists are going to say, because these people generally are looking for me to help them marry them up with angels or venture capitalists. And I have to think like an angel or a venture capitalist and say, yeah, well, show me the money. Oh, before I show you the money, show me that this is a valid and legitimate idea that's going to have legs.
Yeah, I wonder if enablement is the other side of that coin then. Like, enablement is to find the data that backs up the choice. It, obviously any of these ideas, like the one thing as I was reading the book, and he says, you will only have two geniuses, two working geniuses, and you will have two frustrations, and that means you have two of the other ones. And I was reading, and the thing that threw me as I went through this, I keep going, there are 4 things that I'm really good at. I mean, that I do on a day-by-day basis, and I think I'm pretty darn good at it. And they're going to have a hard time telling these things apart. And how many questions, I got to ask you this, when you took the assessment, how many questions did it ask you?
It's the nature of the universe, right?
48?
48? Or see, 42 was the number I was supposed to do. But mine asked a 43rd question. And it was really weird. And so because I read the book and because I was summarizing it, I basically, every one of those questions, I knew exactly what it was aiming for, right? So I
Yeah.
tried really hard not to let it color my choices, right? So whatever I did, I got to the end and I think I broke the algorithm. I think it goes, you have a abject tie. And so here is a 43rd tiebreaker question. And it basically came right out and said, would you rather be doing ideation or activation? Pick one. And I sat there for like 10 minutes going, this, I can't pick one. I don't, there is no one, neither one is better than the other. And I finally
Yeah.
just went, okay, so which ones give you joy? They all give me joy. Which one would drain you? Okay, this one, I guess I would get slightly more tired doing this one, so I'll pick the ideation side. And then it came back as, fine, okay, you are WI and the other two are your middle. And I went, okay, all right, I get it now. So, but I bet you any money if question 43 would have been answered the other way, it would have flipped the switch on those.
Yeah, I would be curious to look at, not that I know anything about
Yeah.
it, but the psychometrics underneath this. Like, how do they know it's a valid constructed instrument and blah, blah, blah?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. We've done this in a million things, and he's developed the story in the book is a group that derives the model through a problem they're trying to solve. And that basically mirrors, according to Lencioni, how he arrived at the model in the first place, doing the similar thing that they do in the story, just not, the names have been changed,
The narrative has been.
but the
Okay.
application is similar. So
Okay.
okay, so we've dug into Jeff a little bit. So is it time to mine Matt for information?
Yes.
That sounds painful, but I'll tell you what the sheet
It's
says.
better than probing.
Yes, let's go straight to the sheet, if you will, I pray. So my two working geniuses apparently are discernment and invention.
Okay.
So that means ability to assess an idea or situation with gut feel, not data. I do feel like that's accurate. I feel like I have pretty good intuition. And invention, coming up with new ideas and solutions. I would not argue with that.
Okay.
Frustrations are enablement and galvanizing, which makes sense. Enablement is providing people with support and assistance in a way that is needed. I mean, I get that that's an important thing to do, but I don't, it's not my,
Right.
yeah.
So the thing about enablement is it's kind of it's got a big component that's meeting people where they feel, right? It's taking into account their needs and wishes and feelings in that as well. And when I was answering those questions, the thing I'm going, okay, is like, someone comes to me with a problem. Do I focus on the problem? Do I focus on the person? And I
Yeah.
don't go to the person first, and that's why I scored why I think my enablement scored lower. And I think that's why for me. So I don't know if that helps from that standpoint.
Yeah, it does. I mean, from my perspective, I feel like I'm very empathetic. Like I can make a connection with people. I can feel what they're feeling a lot of times, right? I have a good intuition for people, but I don't necessarily want to rush in and provide support, right? I'm not necessarily the person who will come and try to prop you up. I'll certainly meet you there, right? And I get that that's a useful thing to do for people. It's a service I provide. You're welcome. But it's not, it's not what gets me out of bed in the morning, right? It's useful, but it's not, I guess, the core.
You mean you don't roll out of bed thinking, man, I'm gonna go prop somebody up
I'm gonna
today.
go enable the hell out of something today.
I'm based on my assessment, I'm 7% too self-absorbed to do that. I'm just more interested in the discernment and the invention. The other one was galvanizing, yeah, which is kind of similar. Like, let's all go. I don't know. It's not my style.
Mm.
Well, I know. I mean, just look at how the podcast came about and stuff.
That's exactly what I was thinking. This explains why the podcast took 8 months to get off the ground, because I was like, oh, here, this is a good idea I can discern, right? And here's a way we could do it. but and maybe the tenacity, like I'm competent in tenacity, so eventually we started doing
Yeah.
some stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't top of the list for me,
Yeah. But
or for you, Mr.
well,
Markey.
if from a tenacity standpoint, yeah, we are definitely screwed, right? But the but once there was something to
Yes.
promote, well, I've got a competency in galvanizing, so I will.
Isn't that
I
interesting?
can do that, and
Yes.
right. So I'm, it was because when I first started reading the book, I was just like, oh God, I would hate to have a strength in galvanizing. That sounds like that would be terrible. But I looked at it differently. I thought galvanizing was going to turn out to be like project management, and it's not. Enablement is more aligned with project management than galvanizing is.
Yeah.
Galvanizing is really more around sales and evangelization and things like that, I think.
Well, what they say is rallying, motivating, and provoking people to take action around an idea or an initiative. So that sounds to me like natural, charismatic leadership. Let's all go this direction. Won't you join me? Kind of a thing.
Yeah. Now that we've got a good idea that somebody has discerned that this is the way to go, now let's get the troops invested in doing this.
Yep. Once we've invented a method to get there, then yes, let's go do it.
So it's turning your delusion into a vision. Because you know the difference between vision and delusion is how many people see it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it could be subjective in some cases. And well, maybe you need some discernment. Yeah.
So I think that this has some application. Like, if we were to look at some of the struggles that you have, there's a thing that he talks about is if you think of each of the 6 stages from a elevation standpoint. To go, let's do a pilot analogy for Jeff's benefit here. That wonder is at the 30,000 foot level, and then you drop 5,000 feet at a time until you get to tenacity, which is like the last 5,000 feet. Okay, so
something starts beeping
so
to let you know
you're
it's
at
time.
these levels. And so when you're doing things, there's different types of work that we do, like brainstorming. So brainstorming engages certain geniuses more heavily than others, right? And so
Makes sense.
wonder, invention, maybe even some discernment. In brainstorming, you don't want the discernment going, this is a
Right.
bad idea, don't do that. But you might need some discernment to say something, just to give some feedback, like just to keep the brainstorm within the confines of our.
Yeah, to guide it without saying no,
Yes.
just to give another idea that will guide the
Right.
group in a different direction.
You don't
Yeah.
want them calling balls and strikes, but you want them to just say, okay, I think you're getting. That's a good invention, but that's actually not the problem we're trying to solve, right? You've gone beyond the confines of the problem, and I think that's where that.
Which is a thought I have all the time in conversations with people. This is great, but this is way too much space for us to travel. Let's go over here.
But think about this: you're in a
myself all the
brainstorm,
time.
right? You've got a bunch of people who are wondering and inventing and discerning, and they're doing all this stuff. But they're sitting in the room is a tenacity guy, right?
Yeah.
And what do the tenacity guys always want to do? They want to get down and dirty. They want to start. But how will you do that? Let's start talking about implementation.
Right.
And it's a jarring effect. Everyone's up here going, da, 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 dreams and hope and purpose and all this other stuff. And then someone goes, yeah, but
bunch
how
of
you
fluffy
actually going
BS.
to do it?
What are we going to
Yeah.
do, Phil?
And it just shuts everything down. Like everyone just goes, okay, that's not where we are right now. Right. So to recognize that different members of your team are going to have certain strengths and weaknesses. This is all good stuff. Like, yeah, save that tenacity. Once we've come to the decision of what we're doing, we're going to be counting on you to take this thing home. But,
So you don't exclude the tenacious people from the brainstorming, but you know what they're tend to do going in, so you can facilitate better. Is that kind of
right? But we hope that they have at least 2 geniuses, right? So
that's a good point.
Maybe one of the other ones, like maybe they're not all about the end game. Maybe they're tenacious and galvanizing or something like that, and say, well, hey, we could use you a little bit more on the evangelization idea of some of this stuff. Don't think about implementation right now. Think about promotion.
Yeah. Getting people
Right,
aligned.
which is still not quite where you are in brainstorming, but it's a heck of a lot closer. You're at closer to the altitude. And then there's still competencies, right? They may still have a competency in one of the other skills that we should be using.
That's a great point. None of these are binaries. They're not yes, no. They are sort of continuums, and yeah, everybody's sort of on a a more or less spectrum.
Yeah.
So I can see where having a clear understanding of where people's strengths are and where they play the role they're best suited to doesn't mean that they can't contribute in other areas, but there is a place for, for the example, the tenacity person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do want to pick apart how are we going to actually implement this, but not yet. And so where do they
Yeah.
play that role in the whole continuum, to use your analogy?
So maybe
Yeah.
the tenacious person is the one who's keep an eye on the clock and going, you guys have been talking for a really long time.
We need to do something, even
Can
if
we,
it means
can
getting
we,
out of
can
this.
we get to a solution? Like maybe it's the clock watcher, right? I had the clock watcher,
could
but
be.
like we would be doing refinement, and then somebody who just declared themselves to be keeping everything on track every 15 minutes would go 2:15, like, okay, thanks, and all's well.
time box
yeah,
police.
and all's well, thank you. And then 2:30, like, please stop that, because I'm all about the wonder and the invention, and you are a buzzkill, man. So then another activity, that decision making, right? We brainstormed a bunch of ideas. Now we have to decide what we're going to do with. It isn't all about discernment. There's going to be aspects of invention in that too, because if maybe one of the ideas is okay, but if it was tweaked a little, right, we might need to
Yes.
invent it a little bit more. And then there's the galvanizing part of it, saying, okay, is this something we can get excited about, right? It's a good
Yeah.
idea, but how are we going to sell this? How are we going to promote it? So
Totally.
So,
Yeah, no, and I keep coming back to the idea that just because it's your working frustration, if it is, doesn't mean you're not good
Right.
at it. Doesn't mean you're not the best person to do it. It just means you might not like it.
Exactly.
Which, because when I did read some of the book, and the narrative was all about this person who's going through their career, and sometimes they really like their work and they're excited about getting up and going to work in the morning, and sometimes they hate it. And this sort of the model and the analysis is about, well, why do you hate it and why do you love it? It's not about whether you can do it or whether you're even the best person for any particular task. It's, if you're suffering or if you're really happy, here's a way to understand
yeah.
what's going on emotionally.
And it was as I was reading him, I was trying to find patterns of it. Like, okay, so it's whenever he ends up becoming a manager, or whenever, like when he's in the low ranks, he's happy. And when he becomes a manager or an owner or whatever, he suddenly finds moments of unhappiness. So he went away from the absolutely hating his job. Like when he was a manager, he hated his job because his job was all about driving the implementation of things, right? And he was more in the I think he turned out to be an invention discernment guy. That's where his geniuses were. And so the actual implementation details just drove him nuts. And if that's all you're doing, you're going to be miserable in your job. The thing that was throwing him, the thing that would put him into an angry state, was galvanizing. It was a competency for him, but
That's right. He was good
Yeah.
at it, but everybody was like, why are you so
but
pissed
he
off?
was the only one in the organization who was any good at it. So it always
Yeah.
fell on him, and it started to make him
Wear on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then they got into they were, as you're going through this and they're doing things, they're saying, oh, and then we've got all the kids who are doing all the real work, all the interns and the junior ad people and all this stuff. And they just come right out and say, three of them are awesome and one of them is really struggling and we're really having a problem with them. And like, they just don't get the details right on any of the presentations that we're putting out there. And I'm like, okay, well, this is pretty manufactured and pretty glaringly obvious, right? This person is not a tenacious. Right? And then gave the assessment, or essentially they self-assessed. You don't have to take the test. You could read the descriptions and you could figure stuff out.
Yeah.
But this person turns out to be more on the invention side and the discernment side, and wish to do more things like that, which started a really interesting conversation. Like, how many times have you been involved in an organization where they say, well, we've got a person who's just not making it, and they say, well, I would really be better, I feel like I'd be better at the invention or the discernment stuff, and you come back and say, you can't even get the tenacity right, how can we trust you to do that other stuff?
I've been that person in jobs where
Yeah.
the job was to execute and to follow the plan. It's already been set out. We've done the thinking for you. Follow the steps, and it was not good.
And so you'll hear them say things like, well, you got to pay your dues, you got to put in the time, and then you'll be rewarded by getting to do the thing that you're really happy to do, which is freakishly ironic, because the people who get it promoted first tend to be the people who excel at the thing that's visible. So if you have a super tenacious person and they are excellent at getting stuff done, and then you promote them, all right,
To a place where they might need to invent more or discern more.
where they need to do something to the left of that, and
They get Peter principles right out of their area of
exactly.
expertise.
And so what are they always doing? Where do we find them? Sticking their big nose into police business. They're always in there going, you're not implementing right. You're not doing the stuff that I was good at the way I would do it. It's like, shouldn't you be off somewhere thinking deep thoughts? Why are you getting in our business?
Totally.
It makes it actually puts some of this stuff in interesting perspective.
And I think it's interesting to also, if you overlay some of the other things, whether it's team building or, when you're building a brand new team, how would you construct that? And if you had control over that, you would want to have some balance. We don't always have that. A lot of times we're stuck with the teams that we've got. But even then, understanding, okay, so how can I motivate and use the talents of the people that I've got in the best possible way? Even insofar as, I wonder if we look at Maxwell's theory or
The guy who did Somebody's Watching Me? No. You're talking about a physicist.
No, I'm drawing a blank here. Tuckman.
Okay.
Tuckman.
But it sounds a lot like Maxwell, to be fair to Jeff.
So you're dealing with the Tuckman stages of
The Tuckman, right?
forming, storming, norming, and performing. How do you see that
right.
leading or feeding into this?
I don't know. I'm trying to, we see how teams, again, that's a continuum. And I'm just trying to figure out, is there any parallel, or if you overlay some of this in the context of a team that's forming, for example, and we just talked about that, how can you leverage the talents of those people, understanding where their strengths, for all intents and purposes, and weaknesses are. But
Well,
even later on, what would that look like as they're in a performance mode? Who are the ones that are, doing well, and why is it? Because it's not just the team dynamic of, man, we're performing, we're knocking it out of the park. I always like to peel back the onion to understand, yeah, but why are you knocking it out of the park?
Right.
What is the dynamic that's driving that? And is it, the fact that you've got a good balance between these strengths? I don't know.
Well, if a bulk of the team has a strength, or at least a genius, or at least a competency and tenacity, then those other people are going to get stuff done. I've been on teams where there are people who you definitely thought of as the closers and the people who you could count on to get stuff done, but there were plenty of other people who you could count on as the cheerleaders and the rallying people for that, right? So I think that in forming, if you knew what everyone's strengths were, if you knew what their geniuses were, you could say, let's look at what this team's purpose is. This team is pure implementation. That's all they're ever going to do. They're going to get a spec. They're going to write code. It's going to get put out there. So
Yeah.
you're going to want people who are going to be leaning in that direction. But you could also look at, like, if you had a lead for that team, would you want someone with some discernment in that role? If you've got, like, is there, like, at what point do you want some of those other flavors in what the team does? And so you could form your team more intentionally to make sure you filled the gaps.
Right.
In terms of storming, you might find this as an explanation for why you're getting storming, right?
That's what I was thinking. If you've got the wrong mix of people,
Yeah.
you'd expect to spend more time in that storming
Yeah,
phase.
because you know the person you don't want in implementation, you don't want the wondering person, right? The person who's just going, hey,
my-
now that you're almost done writing that code, what if are we really solving the right problem here?
Have you
And,
thought
and
about
that person's
this?
the product owner.
Right? So
Yeah.
again, the jarring effect when the conversation, where it's supposed to be, and then the voice from the other end of the spectrum comes into it, and everyone just kind of goes, okay, seriously, the time for thinking of solutions is over. We are in, like, just could you curtail that for a little bit? Maybe focus on something else while we get this thing
Yeah.
done.
For a team leader or manager, I would think you'd want to have galvanizing as one of the skills, right? To get people excited,
Yeah.
and enablement to provide people with support.
I think
Obviously, you want
I
to
think definitely product owners would probably want some galvanizing in there.
100%. Let's go towards this vision.
So,
Yeah,
so,
but
so now that's an interesting point. If you're looking for, in the context of, say, Scrum, do you look for product owners that have certain of these traits that are their geniuses? Because, right now I'm working with an organization and they don't have enough product owners. And so they're trying to figure out, so who would be a good product owner? And, they're looking amongst their ranks, and this could possibly be some traits that they might want to look at. I don't know.
Yeah.
100%.
Or at least recognizing if they're not wired for doing that. Like
Right.
they may, like, what's the downside? Now, one of the things that I found really interesting when I first brought this thing up and I stumbled over the three and I left activation out. There's a reason for that. Most people leave activation out. They dream up an idea and then they say, go do it. There's something missing, right? There's the whole, is it even a good idea in the first place? And let's get people excited about doing it. It's look, I've dreamed up this harebrained idea. Implement it
That way.
Yeah, go, do it now. So a lot of organizations could probably do with a bit more discernment. Certainly getting people fired up about doing stuff.
Well, one of the things he talks about is the gaps of discernment,
Yes.
right? So what happens if you don't have it? So the let's see, gaps of genius. Lack of discernment will manifest as over relying on data and models to make decisions that are best made using simple judgment. Right. So over analysis and just like the lack of common sense, I guess.
Yeah. And it's funny because I definitely the discernment side of things, I've always thought of myself as more intuitive, and I've been up against people who are more data driven, and they would put a choice out there and I would boom just give them an answer. I would say that's the answer, and they're like, okay, you didn't even think that through. I said no, because I already know.
Well, I have,
yeah,
but then
I already did, and I built it up. I said, okay, let me slow it down for you. In my past, my experiences have said this. This has allowed me, in a very quick method. I've got a Turing machine in my head that just went ding, 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 and boom, ka-ching. Here's the answer. It comes out. Now I am intuitive in the standpoint. This came through the disk analysis when we did disk. My intuition is very high. I am attuned to trusting my gut. Like I trust that the answer that comes out of the Turing machine is based on data that I've gathered in the past. I don't need
Right.
to analyze it anymore.
You've abstracted out the math. That's all been thrown out. And you're just left with the essence of what the guidance
Right.
is.
And so if you
Yeah.
are that person who can be that discerner or that intuitive decider and you're up against somebody who's more data driven, they're going to, you didn't even think that through. Like, would you at least
Yeah.
pause a little, like look at the sky, kind of do this? Give me some impression.
Pretend to think about it.
Give me the impression
some
you
math on your
calculated that
fingers.
before you just rattle off the answer. Maybe you'll get through my
Pretend like you thought
yeah,
about it.
Yeah, basically.
And as a person who's high in discernment, right, and you're coming up against somebody who's clearly done a lot of research and has a lot of numbers and it looks like a scientific and a valid process, it's hard to remember that they could still be wrong, right? There could be missing an essence of it,
Yeah.
right? That your discernment can. So these things, they check each other, right? And some, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the gaps because that's kind of a key thing. What happens if you are missing something? You know, hopefully you've got somebody at least on a team who's got a competency in those missing areas. It may not be their strength, but they could do it for a little while without burning them out. You just got to be watchful
Right.
for that, right? But if you've got no choice but for someone, it's a frustration for everyone. You're
Yeah,
going to have
that's-
real
that's-
struggle with whatever that part is, right?
Yeah, there be dragons, potentially.
So how do we overcome that? And maybe it's okay, we take turns. Like I'll bite the bullet. I'll do the bad thing this week, but somebody else has to do it because otherwise I will kill you all.
That would be a bad outcome. Yeah, awareness is always the first step, right? If you don't know what's going on, then you can find yourself in a bad, confusing place, and as opposed to just an unpleasant place.
Exactly.
So are you thinking that you're going to take this back to your current situations, client situations, whatever they may be, and try to overlay this on, the teams and organizations
Well,
that you're working with?
I
mean, not overtly, just even subversively.
It definitely is an interesting. It's it's another one of these thought technologies, if you will, that helps you. Like your example of selecting a product owner and looking across the candidates. It's a relevant example, I think, right? You wouldn't want somebody. Well, what would you want? You'd want somebody who has discernment, right? And you'd want some galvanizing because they have the vision and they bring. You could probably get away with somebody. I don't know. Low in tenacity. I mean,
Yeah.
they have to have enough tenacity that they can actually prep and be ready to tell the stories to the team and do all the communication. But maybe that's not as important. So yeah, I would use it in that sense.
So, and I was introduced to this. Someone had suggested, why don't you should look at this because this one situation that we are both looking at, I believe that is only represented by people who have tenacity. Like there is that they are missing some of the other geniuses that are necessary at this stage. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a bold statement. And it's probably an overgeneralization, which may tell me something about you, but still. But
Generalizations are always bad. Let me just say that.
most are, almost all. Yeah.
Mostly.
So, but if I looked at it as I was digging into it, I'm like, okay, if I were to now reevaluate that situation, I actually think what they're missing is activation, like the stuff in the middle, right? They don't do the D and the G. They went straight from W. They got plenty of I. They got I all over the place, right?
So they're inventing stuff, but they're
Yeah.
not vetting out the ideas, and they're not getting other people
Yeah.
rallied.
They're not
towards it.
rallying. They're
Yeah.
just saying we have. So as it is written, so it shall be done.
Yeah.
So invest in my
Totally.
vision. And so I think that is definitely a way to leverage this. If you can look at it and say, I'm not seeing anyone filling in this missing piece of the puzzle. And if they're getting along just fine, it's probably okay. But if they're struggling for some reason and you notice, hey, they come in for a landing and they go straight from 10,000 feet and drop suddenly, or from 20,000 feet they drop to 5,
That sounds like a bad pilot. Can I get a ruling on that? That's not how you do it, right, Jeff? It's not at all how you,
You
do
know,
it.
Or you
and
lost a piece of
maybe
your
maybe
your flying
Jeff's
surface.
maybe Jeff's role as a pilot is why he doesn't like tenacity as much, because that's the end. That's like the flying part is over. Now it's just the landing. Now I'm back on track.
There's never just well, there's always a landing. How good that landing is
That's true.
determines.
Depends on how quickly you
Whether
went through
you
the other
survive.
stages.
Yeah, my dad was a pilot. He described a good landing as one you can walk away from.
I think that's
And
a
a really good landing is one where the plane's not bent at all and it can be used again.
Yeah, I was going to say the walk away from is kind of a low bar.
He was in the Navy, so I don't know if that's relevant. Yeah.
So, all right.
Okay.
I think.
Well, that was
I
great.
think that's all the things. I think we drained this one. Pretty good.
Yeah. You know, I got to say, I was a little skeptical. I thought, oh, no, not another assessment. Jeez. And I still have probably a little bit of a dose of skepticism, because how does he arrive at, you got to have 2 geniuses? Well, what if I have 3?
Yeah.
I mean, but like I said, I haven't read the book yet, but I do get that there could be some value here, at least as I'm trying to evaluate whether it's existing teams or trying to build new teams. I think there is still some value here in understanding these working types. So.
Yeah, and if you step back and you take the perspective that all models are wrong,
Yeah.
right? That none of them are perfect representations of, they're all sort of lossy abstractions, but they can be useful in certain situations, and that's, that's probably good enough.
And the
right?
thing is, the only distinction that, and I quieted my mind by taking it this way. I said that 2 of them are your highest ranked ones, and the next ones, and the difference between your highest rank, your second highest rank, and your third highest rank might be a point. I mean, it might be this much.
Right. So my 2 highest ones might be like 80, 90 percentile,
Yeah.
and for you they're 50, 60, but they're still the highest.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. But so it might be you've got 4 things that are really highly rated, but only 2 of them could be the highest. Right. So you could,
By
I
definition.
could be good at all 4 of those things and even enjoy all 4 of those things. But if it really came down to it, on a quantitative scale, and we force product owners to choose between their children all the time, this one has to be just slightly more important than that one, and that's where the line is drawn here.
There you
Right?
go.
And so 2 of them have to be your lowest. Maybe your second lowest one isn't even all that bad,
Right.
right? It's
Yep.
more draining on you than the other. So you got to put things into a relative scale, I think.
Yeah.
Take it with a grain
But
of
there is
salt.
value in putting things into a structure and forcing some logos on top of it. Yeah.
Yep,
And then selling it.
exactly. Galvanize someone around this thing.
All right. I sense we have truly drained this thing. Should we end
I
this?
think so.
Certainly.
Well, on behalf of Mr. Markey and Mr. Singleton, I'm Mr. Beam.
Thank you for joining us.
Gentlemen, it's been a slice.
That has been This Agile Thing.